to Appomattox Courthouse, one of the most important historic sites in the country.
We're standing on a battlefield, and he's already trying to break out. But General Custer's, on the 8th, has already worked his way around and taken the trains that are waiting on Lee's army. He captures the trains. Then there's another battle, folks. Right down this road here on the left-hand side, you'll see another sign where Custer's cavalry would attack General Walker's artillery division in a terrible fight. But he would eventually overrun them, take another 1,000 of Lee's soldiers captive. Anyway, so they have a meeting that night right down here. You can walk up through the woods. Again, you go down this road on the main road here, and he has decided with his generals that he's going to break out. One more attempt. See his ridge line? Mentions that in the movie. It says west of the town. That is west of the town. And right here, this fence line going in that direction. There's even a sign down there marking the spot. On the morning of the 9th, you'd have found General Gordon, over 9,000 Confederate soldiers at the bottom of this ridge, and Fitz Lee's cavalry. And they would charge up that hill right there and drive the Union off of that ridge line. The Union forces. We capture an artillery site. We mark it up there. It's a battlefield. If that was going on, if you were living in this house or anywhere, where would you go? Well, most of the people in this town have run. The only people who have no place to go, the people who aren't allowed to run anywhere, are the people who are held as slaves here. And the Mclean family. We understand Wilbur Mclean, he's a sugar merchant. He and his 5 children and his wife are in the basement of their house during the fight. General Gordon thinks he has opened the road. He has sent a message to Lee that he's opened the road. But then on the other side of that ridgeline, looking down, he sees something that would shock him. 25,000 Union troops had marched in the evening, all night, the evening of the 8th. Right down that way, folks, on the other side. And he sees what he calls a wall of blue. He sends a message to Longstreet, which is this direction. Send Longstreet. But Longstreet can't bring his forces up. He's blocking the Army of the Potomac in the back. General Lee's only got 30,000 men now. You'll hear about that in the movie. But Grant has over 60. He has much more supplies and food and men. And he's stretched around all the way around. Why can't Lee go this way? Nobody's blocking him in the north except the James River. And it's been raining, so it's deep and running fast. He would understand he's trapped. So he sends Colonel Marshall into the town. Grant, he would send that final message to Grant with the word surrender. So Charles Marshall is sent into the town to find a place to hold the meeting between the generals. And then we understand he sees Wilbur Mclean standing out here since it's quieted down now. There was a tavern standing right here. He offers the tavern. It was pretty much like everything else in the town. It was run down now. So he turns it down. No furniture. So he asks him for the house, and he offers him up the front parlor of his house. And we'll walk that way. Even this place is on the exact site. But to tell you before we go inside, the house unfortunately was taken completely apart at one time. About 1893. I'll tell you more about that inside. It was a business venture. So, company out of New York wants to move this house first to Chicago. That falls through. So they decide to take it down completely, piece by piece, brick by brick, and restructure it in Washington, D.C. But in 1893, we understand there's a big stock market dive. The company cannot do it. Unfortunately, folks, this building laid out right here in the room, and I'm sorry, right here in the yard for 55 years. And that was a main road still, and people coming by knowing what they're looking at, parts and pieces would disappear. And also, what didn't disappear rotted, except for the brick. So what you're looking at, what is original, is about 5,500 of the bricks. But it has been completely rebuilt on the exact site by the National Park Service. And I've even got an interesting picture. If y'all want to step a little closer. The park gets this about 1930. They want to rebuild this house. World War II kicks in, of course. It slows things down. By 1948, they're rebuilding it. And standing right here, April 16th, 1950, you have General, World War II General Ulysses S. Grant III, Robert E. Lee IV, standing right here, cutting the ribbon, opening the house. Welcome to the Mclean House. It is on the exact site of the surrender proceedings. Welcome. Let's go inside.
But when you go downstairs, you're going to see a stone hearth underneath a wood stove. This is the original. It was there when they rebuilt this. So the house is on the exact site. So when Colonel Marshall is provided this, he would send the message to General Lee, who would ride in on his famous horse. Y'all remember the name? Traveler. That's right. With Colonel Marshall and a private. But Grant would have to ride nearly 22 miles all the way around. He's up on that ridge, and General Sheridan points out the house, and he rides down on his horse, Cincinnati. But he has many officers with him, soldiers that come in. So in the room, you have General Lee and Colonel Marshall, but you'd have several Union officers there. Grant would arrive about a half hour later. Robert E. Lee, we understand, arrives at 1 p.m. and he has sat down in a nice chair in here and starts taking a nap. He's had a bad day, bad week, maybe even a bad year, if you think about it. Grant would arrive, we understand the gentlemen start shaking hands, and Grant met him in 1846 in Mexico during the Mexican-American War. And he's making small talk with him to the point where Robert E. Lee would finally have to say, please write the surrender terms. So when you look in this room, understand Robert E. Lee is sitting behind kind of a nice fancy marble top table. A smaller one is pulled away from the wall for General Grant. Grant would sit down with a pencil and his notes, and he would write the surrender terms, pass them to General Lee, who would make a correction about the exchange of prisoners in a pencil. And that pencil is actually up in the museum that we have, the same one. Then he would hand it back. Eli Parker, on Grant's staff, would then write out the surrender terms in ink. He's the chief of the Seneca, the Iroquois Nation. He's been on Grant's staff. Anyway, he writes that out. And then Colonel Marshall would write the acceptance in a paragraph. General Lee would sign it, and it's done. Now, General Grant has done exactly what the president mandated. Let him up easily. Don't take him prisoner. And that's what he has done. The Confederate officers are allowed to keep their sidearms, their swords, their pistols, horses. General Lee would work out that even his enlisted troops, his soldiers, would be allowed to keep their horses or mules. They'd be able to take them back home if they could. But they are going to have to surrender their weapons. But they do work this out. They're not being taken prisoner. That night, 6 generals come into this house, into this room, and they're going to work out the details. You can see there's no furniture in there, by the way. It's gone. What happened? They got nothing to write on, so they have to bring in one of the generals brings in a table, a field table. It's in our museum. And they work out the details of how they're going to surrender the next several days. And then you can see that table up there. The next day, General Lee and General Grant would meet again. When you look back behind the courthouse, you're going to see a gray house on the left, right past it. They would have a meeting. How is he going to get Nearly 30,000 troops home in a war zone. This isn't in the war. They're still fighting in the South. How are they going to get his troops? How are they going to get home without starving to death? How are they going to travel home? So they work out in a very historic building. The very first one that I pointed out, for some who are with me, is called the Tavern, and it is open. You can go inside. And you're going to see authentic parole passes. Each soldier was given a parole passes. They printed 30,000 in that tavern to hand out to each soldier. I just learned last month that one of my great-grandparents received one of those parole passes. And we have those actually written in a book. They're printed out. Found him. Anyway, with that parole pass, they could get food from the Union. Take trains, take boats, take any type of transportation if it's available to help them. Some of them going all the way to Texas, out down to Florida. I mean, they're traveling a long ways and they're still fighting. But that proves that they have not just deserted, but they have surrendered. On the 10th, Lee's cavalry would surrender out here. Down the road, you can see the site where his artillery on the Appomattox River, right down the road here on the left, would surrender. But on the morning of the 12th, marching up on that road you just walked up, with General Chamberlain's forces down here near that gray house, and he has called his army to attention. 22,000 Confederate soldiers march up this road, unit by unit, and they would stack their arms, remove their cartridge belts that holds their bullets. They would roll up nearly 71 battle flags, and they surrendered right along this road. And that was the end. It actually begins the cascading effect, or if you would, the domino effect for the end of the Civil War. And it did start here. You can go into this room. The two tables are not original, they're exact replicas, or the chairs, because the officers in that room, they wanted souvenirs. General Sheridan would actually take the table. We understand that they forcefully paid Wilbur McLean, the owner of the house, money for the furniture. Sheridan actually takes the table Grant sits at. He would ride out and give it to General Custer to give to his wife Lily, and he does. Mm-hmm. And she would hold on to it till she passes away, and it is now in the Smithsonian. There's a secretary in there. The chairs that the general sat at are in the Smithsonian. The fancy marble top table that General Robert E. Lee sat at, General Ord pays $40 for it, forcefully, and takes it. And there's even a picture of him standing beside it in what was the White House of the Confederacy in Richmond later. Becomes his headquarters. And it gets passed down for years, and it's now in a historic museum in Chicago, of all places. It's still there. The two vases up on the hearth, up on the mantle rather, are original. They were in the room, and the couch on the right was in that room. You can see a little dolly sitting there, a little rag doll. There was one in the room. And we understand when the generals got up, the officers were throwing it around the room, kind of passing it around, making fun with it. And they called it the silent witness because all it had was two eyeballs and no mouth. And then one of the officers slid it into his jacket. And it disappeared too. Lula McLean, the young daughter, she's a very unhappy girl because she comes up here and her dolly's gone, along with a lot of the furniture. But that gets passed down in that officer's family for many, many years, son to son to son, until there was nobody to pass it down. They sent it back here in 1992. Wow. It's in our museum. But it did begin right here, the beginning of the end. And also, over 700,000 soldiers have already died. It would stop the killing eventually and free over 4 million people who had been enslaved. So welcome to Appomattox Courthouse, one of the most important historic sites in the country. We began to be reunified.
Store.
Look at that cheese right there.
Well, I mean, they do say cheese gets better with age, but I mean, eventually it gets moldy. But I guess if you can cut the mold off and eat the rest of it. It's usually fine.
That's some playing cards right there. This is the Meeks Mercantile.
Yeah, this was the post office as well.
Yeah, you see the post office box. Smokers and chewers will please spit on each other and not on the stove. This is the grave of Lafayette W. Meeks. He was son of Francis and Maria Meeks. He was born on March 2nd, 1843, and he died in the defense of his country, October 4th, 1861, at Fairfax Courthouse, Virginia. He was a member of the Appomattox Rangers, in which company he served faithfully in the battles of Bull Run and Manassas. And Private Meeks died in camp of a fever. He was 18 years old.
This towel was the first flag of truce sent in by the Confederate forces on the day General Lee surrendered.